In this lesson, we will learn how to create a tool that resets the orientation of selected joints, and we'll do this with Python. Having a tool like this can really help us to save time. You can imagine if we had to do this for 20 or more joints, one at a time would be very cumbersome, but having a script to do this at the click of a button that we can add to our shelf, or perhaps just running it from the script editor, again, would cut down that time significantly. So let's say we go ahead and learn how to create a tool like this. Now what we can do is go ahead and make sure that our command line is set to Python by simply left clicking. So if it's set to Mel, just go ahead and click and have that set to Python. And what we'll do is go ahead and use this to create a joint. We won't be creating our tool from the command line here because this only handles single line code. So we'll need to move over to our script editor. But before we get to that, let me show you how to create a joint. Now, whenever you're wanting to use My Commands with Python, you have to import in Maya's command module. So we would go ahead and type in the following: import Maya.cmds, and then we can create a function that allows us to still use this function here, but we can create a shorter name so we don't have to always type Maya.cmds. So after Maya.cmds, we'll go ahead and type as, and then we can go ahead and abbreviate this. We can type MC. All right, sweet. So import my commands as MC. All right, from here, let's say we go ahead and hit enter. Doesn't have to be highlighted. You can go ahead and hit enter on the number pad, and Maya has recognized that command. All right, sweet. So now it's time to create a joint. We would type in the following. That's going to be MC dot joint, and then we would add an open and close parentheses to finish out this command. And if there were any arguments that we wanted along with this command, joint, we'd add them inside of our parentheses. You can learn more about this in Getting Started with Python, our Artist Guide to Python, as well as Enhancing Maya's Toolset with Python. All right, sweet. So I'll go ahead and run this command, and we now have our joint. Let's go ahead and move this over. We're going to increase its radius so we can actually see it. There we go. And we'll go ahead and duplicate. Let's go ahead and use Control D to do that. We'll go ahead and move this one up. We'll duplicate this once again, and we'll move this over. Now let's go ahead and do this. We'll reorient this by simply rotating this joint. Just want to show you how the tool works. And then we'll go ahead and take the second joint here in the center. Let's press Control A to move over to our attribute editor, and we'll adjust the orientation. We'll just go ahead and put in some arbitrary values. In the joint orient X channel, we'll put in 90. And let's say in Z, we'll put in 180. All right, that's fine. All right, fantastic. Now this joint, we're going to aim constrain. All right, so let's go ahead and grab the second joint in the center. We'll shift select this first joint here that we created. And now, let's go ahead and apply an aim constraint. So I'll head over to the aim options. We'll go ahead and reset our settings, and we'll go ahead and click add. All right, fantastic. So now this has an aim constraint. If we were to press Control A to move over to our channel box, you can see we have some rotate values here. All right, sweet. So let's go ahead and talk about the code we would like to use. So first, if we're wanting to use the aim constraint technique to reorient our joints, we should make sure to search through all of our selected joints for any aim constraints, and then we'd want to, of course, remove those. So after the aim constraint has done its job, we no longer need it. We can go to remove it. So that's one thing we'll want our script to check for. Again, if there are any aim constraints, it'll remove those constraints. And then next, what we should do is go ahead and see if there are any values in our rotate channels, like this joint here. So what it will do is it will transfer those values over to our joint orient channels, as we've already done, and then we'll make sure that it will zero out our rotate channels so we can clean up our rotation. We're left with a 0 value. All right, fantastic. So let's say we go ahead and get started with this code. I'll move over to the script editor. What I'd like to do is go ahead and right click at the top and just clear the history out. So we're starting with a blank slate. All right, sweet. From here, let's go ahead and go to the lower section where we actually script our code. We'll right click and we will choose New Tab. From there, we'll go ahead and make that a Python tab. All right, fantastic. Now, even though we've already imported in our Maya command module, it's always safe to add that to your code to make sure it will always import in the command module. All right, so let's go ahead and type that on the first line. So that's import maya.cmds as MC. All right, fantastic. Next, we'll go ahead and hit enter a few times so we can move down a few lines. And this creates enough space we can read each line of code. What's great about Python is, unlike Mel where we need a semicolon to finish our line of code, we don't need that with Python, but there are some very important things we need to do with Python in order for our code to work, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that very soon. All right, so now what we can do is go ahead and create a variable to grab all of our selected objects, store those objects. So let's go ahead and name that variable cell. We'll have that equal to Maya's list selection command. So that's going to be mc.ls, and then we'll go ahead and add our parentheses. Now from here, of course, we want to find our selection, so we would use the flag SL, and we want that equal to capital T for true. Now we'll put a comma, and then space, and then following that, we need to specify that this should only work with joins. So we'll go ahead and type in type. So what type are we dealing with? We'll have this equal to the word joint in quotes. So we can either use single quotes or double quotes. I tend to stick with double quotes, so we can go ahead and work with that. All right, fantastic. So now what we can do is go ahead and create a for loop that says for all of our joints in our selection, let's go ahead and run the following commands. So let's go ahead and move a few lines down, and we'll now type for, and then all JNTS. So this is going to be our variable for our for loop. Let's go ahead and hold down Control and middle mouse button scroll forward so we can zoom into our text a bit more. All right, fantastic. So for all joints, in this variable here, all joints in, let's go ahead and type that next. Cell, this is our variable that grabs all selected objects. Following that, we need to now put a colon. Once we hit enter, you can see that Maya will indent the next line, and this is very important for Python. In order for the for loop to work, we need to indent the next line for all objects that should be affected by the for loop. All right, fantastic. So it's nice that Maya will do that automatically. So the first thing we'll do after we create this for loop here is we need to go ahead and check for any aim constraints. All right, so let's go ahead and type in the following. We'll use an if statement. I'll hit enter just to add a little bit more space here. And let's enter on the keyboard, not number pad, because on the number pad, if we use that, it'll go ahead and try to run the code. We might have it error out. All right, so that's going to be if space mc dot obj exists. So if object exists, we can use this to search for objects or nodes, which is super cool. So following that, we'll go ahead and add our open and close parentheses, and inside, we'll go ahead and create, again, a way of the script finding all of those aim constraints. So that's going to be all JNTS, plus we need to add a concatenation here. Then we can go ahead and add double quotes, and inside, we'll go ahead and add an underscore, and that's going to be aim constraint asterisk. So what does this all mean? Well, what this is saying is that, all right, we should search for all aim constraints of all selected objects. So remember, all of our selected objects are now going to be stored here in this variable for our for loop, and then this says plus underscore aim constraint. So it's looking for this exact name, and the asterisk allows us to make sure that no matter what aim constraint exists, we go ahead and select it. So let me go ahead and show you this clearly. If I were to go ahead and minimize the script editor, take a look at this first joint here that we created. You can see if we were to scroll down, here is its name, and then we have an underscore aim constraint, and then a number. So with the asterisk, it'll go through and search for all aim constraints no matter what the number is. Fantastic. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back to our script. All right, so we have this line. Now it's time to add another colon. So after our for loops, after our if statements, we add this colon, again, to let Maya know that the code that follows is a part of the statement or this for loop. All right, so now let's go ahead and hit enter again to move down to the next line. And what we can do is go ahead and type mc.delete. And what do we want to delete? Well, we want to delete our aim constraints, right? So we could just go ahead and copy everything here after the first parentheses all the way down to the last one. Let's go ahead and use Control-C to copy and then paste. So that's what we want to delete. Fantastic. And we should always keep track of our indents, especially for longer codes, but it's great that Maya does this automatically to save us a lot of time. All right, fantastic. So now that this is done, we need to come out of the indent of our if statement. We still need to be underneath our for loop, of course, but not underneath the if statement. So let's go ahead and do this. We'll go a few lines down and we'll press Shift-Tab, and that will shift us out of our if statement. Fantastic. All right, so let's go ahead and finish this up. What we now need to do is figure out the values that we have in our rotate channel. So we can use the getAttr command to do that, and we'll have this tied to a set of variables. What's great is that we can reuse these variables with Python, unlike Mel, where we have to create a brand new variable if we already have defined that variable as, let's say, a float type or a string type. Python doesn't have that restriction. All right, so that's going to be Ori_x. We'll have that equal to mc.getAttr, and then we'll add our parentheses. Now inside, what do we want to search for? The rotate channels of all joints, right? So we'll go ahead and type all JNTS plus, and then we'll add our quotation marks because we're searching for a specific channel here. So that's going to be .rx. Fantastic. Let's now go ahead and copy this. We'll move to the next line, paste, and this is going to be for the y-axis. So let's go ahead and change all of those x's to y's. We'll now go ahead and move to the next line, paste, and we'll change our x's here to z's. Fantastic. So next, we want to make sure to set all of our joint orient channels to the values that we acquire from this first part of the code that searches for our rotate values. All right, so let's go ahead and move a few lines down, and we'll type in the following. That's going to be mc.setAttr. We'll go ahead and add our parentheses, and inside, that's going to be all JNTS. Again, we need to add a concatenation here, so we use the add operator, space, we'll add our quotes, and inside that's going to be dot, joint, and capital O for orient, and then the channel. So it's X, Y, and Z. Let's go ahead and work with X first. So that's all joints plus, more specifically, the joint orient X of all joints. And what do we want to set that to? Well, we want to set that to our X-axis value here that we have gathered from this variable, ORIX. Remember, ORIX searches for the rotate X value. So we want to transfer that into this joint orient channel here. So right after our last quote mark, we're going to add a comma space, and then we simply need to go ahead and copy our variable and paste. Fantastic. So we're just about done. Let's now go ahead and copy this line, move to the next line, paste, and again, we're changing our X's to Y's. And you can see the name conventions we're using here just to save a bit of time. We don't want to use something that would not be concise. Otherwise, we can spend a lot of time creating a code that doesn't have to be so lengthy. All right, so let's go ahead and just make sure we replace all of those letters. So on this next line, we're replacing the X's with Z's. All right, now the last section of this code is going to zero out all of our rotate channels. So once we've set our joint orient values, we now need to zero out our rotate channels as we've already done. So this is really simple. That's going to be mc.setAttr, then we'll add our parentheses, and inside that's going to be all JNTS plus, and then we'll go ahead and add our set of quotes, and inside that's going to be .rx. After our last quotation mark, we'll go ahead and add a comma space and then put the value 0. This is what we want to set the rotate value to. Let's go ahead and copy that, and we will paste 2 times for Y and Z. Fantastic. Now, before we run this, I'd like to point out, if you ever want to add a comment, this is just a way of creating notes. You could always just go ahead and do so by using the hash mark found above your 3 key on the keyboard. So we can hold down Shift and hit 3, and we create a hash mark, and this is how we can create comments or notes. So on line 4 here, we can go ahead and type, let's say, for loop. And comment marks or commented lines are not evaluated. Again, that's why it's a great way to add notes, because Maya does not recognize any commented lines. All right, so we can go ahead and type for loop here. Or if you wanted to, let's say, comment multiple lines, you can go ahead and use 3 single quotes. So you can see how that changes the text. But let's go ahead and isolate the area that we have created this multi-line comment by simply adding 3 more single quotes a few lines down. And then we can go ahead and call this our 0 joint orientation tool. Fantastic. And I will make sure to comment out each line, and that will be added to your scripts folder of this project. All right, but now it's time to run this code. Let's go ahead and see what happens. So with all of our joints highlighted, if we were to go ahead and now highlight our code and hit enter on the number pad, let's go ahead and take a look. You'll notice that nothing errors out. And take a look. All of our joints have been reoriented. So you can see here, this first joint we created, it now points at the second joint. Fantastic. Now the second joint, since its rotation was set to 0, you'll notice when we press Control-A to move over to our attribute editor that our joint orient channels are 0 as well. And then this last joint, since we rotated it, we've transferred all of those rotate values over to our joint orient channels. Fantastic. So at this point, you can go ahead and highlight your code, middle mouse button drag, and add that to your shelf. Maya will automatically recognize it as a Python source. Then you can go ahead and right click and choose Edit, head over to Shelves. Can rename this to 0 joint orientation. Fantastic. We can go ahead and copy that, use that as the tooltip. And then for our icon label, the text that we see underneath the icon, we can always just go ahead and name this, let's say, ZJNT. Fantastic. And we can add up to 5 letters without having those letters get cut off. All right, sweet. So let's go ahead and choose Save All Shelves, and there we go. So we now have a really cool way of zeroing out the orientation of our joints. So let's say we go ahead and move to the next lesson, and there we'll start to create a joint system for the torso.